Hello everyone, welcome to the Buzz the Prey Manga. Today we continue the latest Global Freeze chapter, rewritten and edited by me in English for a smooth reading experience. All visuals and story flow are personally edited to give you the best manga style storytelling. Support the original creator by checking the official manga. So let's dive right into the today's chapter.
Chapter 2651 Deng Shintong defends the City One. In the past 2 years, the corpses of the sea monsters killed by Wu Di Donghai have piled up to form a small mountain. Even today, he wasn't confident he could protect everything in this battle, because this time, the kingdom of Zepin is backing up its forces, and it's no longer those ordinary demon armies. And Isabu, deep in the sea, an even colder aura quietly rose up. The fog was slowly pushed aside by some enormous force, revealing the faint outline behind it. That was a terrifying sea monster with a body length exceeding 300 meters. The outline of the creature resembles an extremely exaggerated shark, with a dorsal fin as high as a mountain ridge. Its body is covered with a thick layer of black scales, each scale looking as if it had been slashed by a blade, with sharp edges and ghostly blue flames flickering between the gaps. Behind the dragon, 3 thick tails swayed slowly in the seawater. Each tail had a curved bone spike at its end, and the surface of the bone spike was covered with dark purple poisonous mist. With each sway, strange marks were drawn on the surface of the sea. Isabu. The names of the powerful figures from the land of the marshland have appeared more frequently in battle reports along the eastern coast of the sea in the past 2 years than only those ancient names that truly stand on the throne of gods. Itself is a moving calamity. Legend has it that the dragon once whipped an island to pieces with its tail, and once created a massive whirlpool in the deep sea that could swallow an entire fleet. The people of the land by the lake worship as a demigod and allow to lead troops to patrol the battlefield. This time, Du came in person. The seawater surged around him. Yumabozu's broad figure appears and disappears among the waves, like a series of dark shadows carrying huge water tanks, slowly rising from the deep water. The wet woman, with her long, wet hair trailing behind her, traced the surface of the water with her slender fingertips, creating a series of bubbles. Floating within the bubbles were pale faces and distorted figures, emitting suppressed laughter. In addition, there are countless ominous monsters with fish bodies and human faces, lined up in the depths of the sea fog, as if 100 ghosts had walked out of an ancient painting. Behind them stood the fleet of the kingdom of the riverbank. One after another, strangely shaped warships slowly advanced through the sea fog. The hulls were made of a mixture of some kind of ancient wood and black iron. Paper lanterns swayed in the wind hanging from the sides of the ships, and twisted symbols were drawn on the lampshades. The light was dim due to the haze, but it had an unsettling red color. That is truly a ghostly army at sea. Deng Shintong. It stopped behind the sea fog of Isabu, its huge body half floating and half submerged, its 3 tails lazily sweeping across the water, and the 2 ghostly blue flames in its eyes staring in the direction of Tenkai City. The waves lifted up their bodies, and the sound was carried by the wind pressure, like a low roar filtered by the seawater, echoing across the entire sea surface. You dare to block my way. Can you stop them this time? Deng Shintong raised the megaphone and coughed softly. Whether it can be blocked or not, we'll only know after trying. His smile had a slightly roguish quality, but his gaze was extremely cold. Your country by the lake has been very arrogant lately. Don't you think that the Chaos Kingdom is the only one that dares to come here and court death? Isabu narrowed his eyes for a moment. Chaos is dead. You Earthlings may not be willing to admit it, but you can't change that. The god of the nest fell into your hands. The land by the lake has not forgotten. Today, we will use your city as a small offering to the deceased god. When the word God of the Sun was mentioned, all the monsters on the sea bowed their heads at the same time. The red light from those paper lanterns suddenly increased by an inch, the sea fog became thicker, and even the outlines of the skyscrapers in Tianhai City became blurred. As one of the 3 pillar gods of the Zepin kingdom, the god of the god of the sun, defied the rules of the creator god and tried to kill Zhang Yi. As a result, it was later wiped out due to a misjudgment of the rule's quantity, which was the greatest pain for the entire Zipan kingdom. Therefore, they had been planning this revenge for a long time. Now, 2 years have passed, and Zhang Yi still hasn't returned. They conclude that Zhang Yi has died in the perilous universe. After all, a night-level powerhouse is as insignificant as dust in the vast universe and cannot even withstand a simple cosmic storm. Deng Shentong gripped the megaphone, his fingers tightening slightly. He knew this was no bluff. 2 years after that battle, the hatred of the Zipan kingdom for Earthstar was almost etched into its very bones. The ancient god, the killer whom they spoke of, was someone they gnashed their teeth at and wanted to tear to pieces. The act of attacking the Huashu kingdom was itself tinged with retaliation. Deng Shentong slowly inhaled the sea breeze, and the fire in his chest burned even brighter. He suddenly smiled. His smile was genuine. Then you might be disappointed. Chaos is not dead. He just messaged us. He said he's back. This statement caused an uproar along the Tianhai City defense line. The soldiers of the Shadow Squad trembled slightly at their respective battle stations, and many of them felt their breaths become hotter in an instant. Many of them had personally witnessed the man who cleaved the entire battlefield in two with a single sword strike. Those 4 words were like a rekindled flame, burning from one end of the defense line to the other. Isabu let out a low, mocking laugh. You're lying. It slowly raised one of its tails, and the bone hook with venomous barbs at the end of the tail gently slashed in the air. Do you know what the most ridiculous thing about you humans is? Even when you're already cornered, you still try to comfort yourself with such a clumsy lie. If Chaos were alive, it would have returned long ago. He didn't come back. That means he and his companions have been buried somewhere in the universe. You cannot defend the kingdom of Huashu, much less the city. Today, we will let you watch this city sink into the sea. It flicked its tail. The sea surface suddenly collapsed. Centered on a large area of seawater suddenly rises, forming a water wall tens of meters high, as if a walking tsunami is being controlled by the at will. Inside the water wall, countless tiny whirlpools churned wildly, each whirlpool powerful enough to tear apart a warship. Isabu gently swayed. The wall of water, carrying a devastating pressure, crashed down towards Tianhai City. Black Tortoise, help me. Deng Shentong whispered. On the coast of Tianhai City, a giant tortoiseshell floats on the water, resembling a massive aircraft carrier. When the troops from the land of Zipan attacked, he immediately led his own troops to help. Leave it to me. Xuanwu's deep voice echoed along the coast, and an energy array rapidly unfolded within its abdominal cavity, while the tortoiseshell shield on its back suddenly rose up. In an instant, a huge, invisible barrier rose up over the sea in front of the city. The water wall crashed into the barrier. The earth and sky trembled. The entire city of Tianhai felt as if it had been lifted up and slammed down, with only a deafening roar in everyone's ears. Chapter 2652 Deng Shentong defends the city too. You think you can stop me? You're not worthy. Isabu's voice was laced with sarcasm. The people of Huashu Kingdom had long since thoroughly understood the strength of these experts. Otherwise, how could they have dared to invade directly? With an ability index as high as 43,000 points, he is unmatched in the entire Gangnam region. As long as Huda comes, who can stop her from swallowing up Tianhai City? Tsunami tide. The shockwave swept across the sea and slammed into the energy wall constructed by Xuanwu. The barrier was sunken in a huge arc, as if it might shatter at any moment. Xuanwu let out a muffled groan, and a large amount of blood instantly gushed from his mouth and nose, staining the sea in front of him red. Xuanwu, known for its defense, was surprisingly unable to withstand a single blow from its opponent. It's not over yet. Isabu's voice came crashing down again like a tidal wave. Its 3 tails swung high into the air at the same time, crashing heavily onto the sea surface. 3 enormous whirlpools were instantly smashed into the sea, causing the seawater at their center to plummet and form 3 terrifying whirlpools leading directly into the deep sea. The edge of the whirlpool spread rapidly, engulfing countless warships and dragging them into the depths like twisting toys. Deng Shintong's sharp eyes fixed on everything before him, as beams of light from defensive towers illuminated the surrounding coastline. Before leaving, Zhang Yi took most of his forces with him for safety reasons when landing on Mars, but he still left some backup plans. For example, these energy defense barriers can withstand the attacks of enemies at the level of Black Bishop for a short period of time. However, it can only withstand the onslaught for a period of time. Damn it, let's fight them. Wu Di let out a low growl and took out the psionic gun from behind his back. His long hair was dyed almost silver by powerful telekinesis, and his eyes were flashing with white light. Powerful telekinesis was concentrated on the gun, and then it surged forth as he pulled the trigger. The moment the gun was fired, the entire sea surface dimmed. A very thin silver light trailed an arc in the air, piercing straight into Isabu's eyes. Isabu tilted his head slightly. The two ghostly blue flames in its eyes suddenly shrank to a single point, and a sharp whistling sound exploded in the air. The telekinetic bullet was slightly deflected by some visible force when it was still half a foot away from its eyes. It grazed its cheek, flew past, and plunged into the distant sea, splitting the entire wave into a deep trench. Pitiful, Isabu said in a low voice. You so-called strong people are nothing more than drowning insects in the face of the deep sea. With a flick of its tail, it condensed the water wall that had just been pressed down into countless water blades, which slashed wildly at Xuanwu's barrier. Cracks spread rapidly across the barrier. Blood trickled from the corner of Xuanwu's mouth, and his arms trembled slightly beneath the armor plates. Can it still hold on? Deng Shintong asked in a low voice. We have to hold on, even if it means holding on. Xuanwu bites. If this barrier collapses, the cities behind it will be flooded. Yumabozu walked step by step from behind the waves. Its silhouette is enormous, seemingly carrying the entire sea on its back. With each step, the sea level suddenly rose a tier. It raised one hand. Countless water columns rose from the sea, like inverted water vats, crashing down on the barrier erected by Xuanwu. The wet women spread out, their long hair trailing seawater as they climbed onto the warships caught in the whirlpools. With a gentle flick of their slender fingers, they pulled soldiers into the water one by one. The Shadow Squad immediately took action. They moved like shadows between the warships and the city defenses, their feet treading the water as if it were flat ground. Light flashed in the sea mist, cutting off the long hair that dragged the shadows, and pulling the soldiers who had been swept into the water back onto the deck. Bailey Chongqing chose crossbows as his weapon, because only specially made crossbows could withstand the power of the Iron Fist. A bow that requires thousands of units of strength to draw is being drawn, and arrows are being knocked at lightning speed. One arrow after another shot through the heads of sea monsters, pinning them to the crests of the waves. But the number of enemy troops was simply too great. Isabu swayed its tail slightly behind, and the three huge whirlpools expanded and grew larger. At first, the warships that were swallowed could still struggle a bit with their power and defensive arrays, but later they were simply stuffed into a meat grinder. A state-of-the-art destroyer, along with its defensive shields, was swept into the center of the vortex before everyone's eyes. At that moment, the sounds of the entire sea seemed to be swallowed up, leaving only the muffled, indistinct sound of metal being torn apart in the deep sea. Tenkai City has been defended. Someone whispered behind their back. The voice was filled with pessimism and despair. They ultimately failed to wait for Zhang Yi to return. Deng Shintong heard it. Looking at the layers of defenses ahead that were being crushed, torn apart, and swallowed up, his Adam's apple bobbed slightly. Of course, I know that this judgment is wrong. Now, facing the formidable Isabu and the all-out navy from the land of Zihin, they have indeed held their ground. Even he himself, even Xuanwu and Bailey Chongqing, were only delaying the sinking of this city. But still smiled. We must hold on, even if it means holding on. I will guard this city until chaos returns. I promised that I would protect it. How can I break my promise? Even if I die in battle, I will return this city to you intact. Xuanwu coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his smile was even uglier than a man's. I fear that before you return, we will have already perished in battle. I will definitely come back. Deng Shintong's gaze never left the sea ahead. When those 4 words landed on S terminal, didn't even have time to drink a sip of water before leading his team up the city wall. Knows exactly where Zhang Yi is now. All I know is that always keeps his word. Isabu seemed to have grown tired of teasing. Its 3 tails rose high at the same time, and the tips of its venomous stingers glowed with an even more eerie purple light. Enough, game over. Let this city sink to the bottom of the sea. The tail suddenly fell down. All 3 tail spikes simultaneously plunged into the sea. With its tail stinger as the base, an extremely terrifying energy instantly spread out, as if the entire sea surface had been suddenly twisted from below. The seawater spun wildly, and the 3 whirlpools quickly merged into one. A massive ocean abyss covering the entire coastal waters of Tianhai City is taking shape. The barrier erected by Xuanwu cracked loudly under this force, like a piece of glass being struck by a broken glass. Deng Shintong gripped the communicator in his hand, just about to say, "All troops prepare to retreat," when he suddenly felt the light around him dim for a moment. Means the sea fog is getting thicker. Rather, it was something higher that intervened in this battlefield at that moment. Everyone's heart tightened simultaneously. The sky seemed to have been gently torn apart from the middle by an invisible hand. A thin crack appeared in the clouds, so thin that it was almost imperceptible, yet it brought a suffocating sense of oppression. The crack quickly widened. It stretches from the sky above Tianhai City all the way to the edge of the distant sea. It was as if the entire sky had been sliced in half by a very sharp blade. Chapter 2653 Ling Chi 1. The next instant, a faint light appeared in the center of the crack. The light quickly spread, transforming into the outline of a human figure. His white battlesuit enveloped his entire body, magnificent and elegant, its lines perfectly fitting his form. He shone brightly in midair, like a god descending to earth. That figure was incredibly familiar to everyone, and it moved the entire human camp to tears. There was nothing beneath his feet, yet he seemed to be standing on some unseen dimension, quietly hovering above the battlefield. The Taishu bathrobe gently spread out over his body, like a thin layer of starlight, lifting him up in a near-silent void. No longer the familiar image of him covered in heavy, black armor. In the past, he was like a demon king, but now, protected by the White Emperor's battle armor, he is more like a god. This product, created by Liu Karen's new technology, strictly speaking, a super battle suit combining the technologies of the Yihan clan and the Sand Raiders Ming, was worn by Zhang Yi. Lighter, more flexible, and stronger. Zhang Yi, he's back. At that moment, the entire defense line of Tianhai City seemed to breathe a sigh of relief simultaneously. Xuanwu, supporting the barrier, looked up and squeezed out a sentence. "You bastard, you bastard." He was so excited that he didn't know what to say and could only mutter to himself. For the first time, Deng Shintong's eyes showed a genuinely relaxed smile. He wiped the seawater and blood from his face and looked up at the figure in the White Emperor's battle armor. Zhang Yi looked down at the sea. His gaze swept over the warships being torn apart by the whirlpool, over the soldiers desperately fighting the monsters on the crests of the waves, and finally settled on the enormous sea beast in the distance. Isabu also raised his head. As it looked at the man in the sky, the ghostly blue light in its eyes suddenly contracted, revealing a serious expression for the first time. It certainly recognized that aura. The moment the god of the nest died in battle, the traces of chaos left on the battlefield were deeply etched into its soul. Chaos. You're really still alive. Isabu's voice trembled slightly without him even realizing it. They knew very well just how strong Zhang Yi was. At the great conference of all races, he single-handedly defeated 4 knights. From then on, he became renowned throughout the world. If he hadn't disappeared for 2 years, the kingdom of Zipin would definitely have stayed quietly in its small territory in the Japanese archipelago and would never have dared to invade. Isabel looked up at the radiant figure, and a strong sense of fear welled up inside him.
Run.
At this moment, he and everyone in the entire Zepin kingdom fleet around him shared the same thought. Zhang Yi did not reply. He simply looked down upon the entire fleet of the Zepin kingdom. The coldness in his eyes was more piercing than the most biting sea breeze from the East China Sea. In his eyes, Isabu, Kaibwa, and Nami saw only one word: death. Naked killing intent. Zhang Yi suddenly spoke up. The voice was not loud, but it fell clearly into everyone's ears. Isn't it good to be alive? They just had to come here to die. Isabu let out a low growl, raised its dorsal fin, and swung its tail violently in the seawater, creating even higher waves. They had heard of Zhang Yi's legend and knew that in front of a top-tier space-type ability user, running away was pointless, so they chose to fight to the death. You killed our god. Today, we are here to kill you. Even if they couldn't kill Zhang Yi, they would still fight with all their might to severely injure him. This was the thought in the minds of Isabu and the others.
Boom, boom, boom.
The entire fleet of the Zepin kingdom was arrayed on the sea, and all sorts of terrifying auras rose into the sky, severely injuring Zhang Yi. However, Zhang Yi only gently raised his right hand. At that moment, the Taishu bathrobe rippled slightly beside him, and a ring of extremely fine light patterns appeared in the air at the edge of the Wuxiang realm. That is not pure energy ripples. The threads of that space were trembling slightly. His battles and observations with the Sand Slayer Ming, the Boundless Sphere, the Tower of Heaven, and Adam in the starry sky world deepened his understanding of the universe's underlying structure. He no longer simply wields his sword in space. He began to reach out and touch the strings that constitute space. Dimensional string solution. This time, based on his knowledge left by Xingming in the Netherworld, the myriad phenomena of the universe, and the boundless sword domain, he enhanced his abilities, making him even more powerful than before. It does not involve the superposition of a certain attribute quantity. This is a deconstruction of the entire battlefield's dimensional structure. He gently clasped his 5 fingers together. It felt as if I were grasping something delicate yet extremely resilient in the void. Everyone saw that scene. Extremely thin streaks of light appeared in the sky, on the sea, and even in the air above the city. The rays of light were initially only a few centimeters long, as thin as spider silk. But in the next instant, they stretched out wildly. Each ray of light carried an indescribable sharpness, piercing the sea from different directions. They extend horizontally, vertically, and diagonally, interweaving into a terrifyingly dense 3D grid. The string of that dimension was forcibly drawn out in him. Those strings are merely lurking within the structure of this world, quietly supporting space and matter. Now, they are pulled out like a fully played violin. Zhang Yi flicked his fingertips lightly. A silent vibration spread throughout the space. In that instant, the warships of the Soto's Pankeo, the demon army anchored in the sea fog, and even the waves they stirred up all seemed to have been paused. Isabu no Natsum felt an extreme sense of danger. It desperately tried to dive into the seabed, its tail whipping wildly, causing the entire ocean to churn violently. The string of dimensions is completely deconstructed at this moment. The structural lines of the space were forcibly rewritten. Suddenly, all those rays of light brightened by an inch. From the sky to the sea, from the crest of the wave to the bottom of the ship, from the middle of the monster's body to the weapon in their goo, every line represents an irresistible cut. They didn't roar, and there was no sound of explosion. Using only an extremely calm approach, the analysis of the hostile targets on this battlefield was completed. Tens of thousands of monsters from the land by the lake, and hundreds of warships, fell silent in an instant. The next second, their bodies, their hulls, their flags, and the strange wood and paper lanterns they used to power the barrier were all neatly cut into countless tiny fragments. It's as if someone used an extremely precise knife to carve thousands upon thousands of lines on an enormous canvas, turning every detail of the painting into dust. Chapter 2654 Lingqi 2. The waves were sliced into thin films of water, which briefly spread out in the air, reflecting countless fragmented light and shadow before closing up and falling back into the sea. The massive body of Isabu was pierced by dozens of beams of light at the same time. Its dorsal fin, its scales, its long tail, and the poisonous bony spikes at the end of its tail were all dismembered into a jumble of broken pieces of armor in a very short time. It tried to roar. As soon as she opened her mouth, her jaw silently slid down. Its eerie blue eyes suddenly contracted, turning into a point that exploded on its shattered head. A patch of eerie light briefly flickered in the air before being gently absorbed by the Taishu bathrobe. The warships silently burst open on the sea. The fragments, arranged in an almost eerie order, scattered like black snowflakes, drifting into the sea. Before the monsters standing on the deck could even scream, they were cut into tiny pieces and fell into the sea along with the wrecked deck. All the demons who roamed the night vanished. Only some shapeless, ghostly figures remained on the sea surface, like smeared ink, which were quickly blown away by the wind. The whole process took less than 2 seconds. For a brief moment, everyone in Tianhai City lost the ability to hear. They saw the sky as a net woven from light, lighting up for a moment and then going out completely the next. It was as if nothing had happened. Only the area in the far sea that was originally filled with warships and monsters is now completely empty. Only the seawater continued to churn due to inertia, slowly calming down. No bodies surfaced. No wreckage remains adrift. After the dimensional string was deconstructed, those enemies were stripped of even the right to be considered residue. Xuanwu finally loosened its arms that were supporting the barrier. The already cracked defensive barrier disintegrated into countless points of light the moment the pressure was released, like raindrops falling back into the sea. He was panting heavily, his vision blurred by a mixture of sweat and blood. He looked up and saw only the figure in the white imperial battle armor in the sky, with his back to the sun, looking like a sword stuck between the heavens and the earth. Deng Shintong tilted his head back and squeezed out a very brief sentence. 2 years have passed and you have become even stronger. Bailey Chongqing put down the great bow and exhaled a long breath of stale air that he had been holding in. At the same time, all the members of the Shadow Squad relaxed their muscles, which had been stretched to the limit. Many of them sat down on the deck, letting the sea breeze hit their faces.
They know.
From the moment Zhang Yi said, "I'm back," the battlefield of Huashu Kingdom was no longer a soft target for those ancient civilizations to manipulate at will. And this is just the beginning. Just as the afterimage of the Wet Woman, which had sunk to the bottom of the sea, was about to completely dissipate, an unseen force suddenly descended from the sky. The seawater dipped slightly under that pull, as if someone had grabbed a clump of it from above, forcibly pulling out a bit of demonic spiritual light from its depths. The realm of formlessness silently unfolded. Zhang Yi raised his hand and gently tapped the exposed space with his fingertips, straightening it out as if peeling away layers of silk. The next instant, a slender figure broke free from the shadows of the deep sea and was lifted into the air by his neck. Seawater cascaded down her body, scattering into fine mist in the air. The Wet Woman's hair clung to her face, her eyes still displaying the ferocity she had when she was bloodthirsty. The next moment, he gripped her throat tightly with his finger, imprisoning all her power within her body, leaving only her struggling. The agony of death did not come. She survived after witnessing her companions being crushed to dust by Zhang Yi in an instant. It wasn't because she was particularly capable, but because Zhang Yi deliberately kept her alive. If he wants to attack the land of the marshland, he needs a brain. Zhang Yi glanced down at her. With an oddity index of 38,000, he can be considered a high-level combatant. He's barely usable. His voice was calm, as if he were assessing a piece of loot he had casually picked up. This statement left Xuanwu, Deng Shintong, and the others who heard it looking extremely embarrassed. They spent so many years and countless resources to reach the White Bishop level, but in Zhang Yi's eyes, they were like ants. The sea breeze whistled between the two of them. On the distant sea, the wreckage of the Zepan Kingdom's warships continued to sink, the stench of blood mingling with the salty air, as if casting a faint aura of death over the area. A familiar aura appeared from Zhang Yi's shadow. Yang Xinxin appeared in front of Zhang Yi. She raised her eyes and looked at the wet woman who was being held in her hand, raising an eyebrow slightly. Zhang Yi glanced at her, his gaze lingering on her face for a moment, and said calmly, "Take it and thoroughly search her mind." Yang Xinxin blinked and nodded slowly. "Good." She raised her hand, her fingers gently clenching in the air. An almost invisible arc tightened between her fingers, like a bowstring that didn't exist. Now she can unleash arrows of love and desire at will, without even needing to summon the complete fallen angel puppet. A faint pink light quickly gathered at her fingertips. The light was delicate and soft, yet it added a viscous, oppressive feeling to the sea surface. The arrow of desire slowly took shape. The arrow is transparent, with countless tiny fragments of emotion churning inside, sometimes turning into a gentle touch, sometimes into a burning possessiveness, and sometimes into dark jealousy and despair. "Look at me." Yang Xinxin stepped forward and stood in front of Ru Nu. She raised her hand and pinched Ru Nu's cold chin, forcibly lifting her head to make her look at her. The wet woman tried to move away, but the boundless realm had already sealed off all her escape routes, leaving her locked in place by those bright pupils. A country by the lake. The number and strength of your top experts, the level of your civilization's development, the size of your army, and all your schemes against the Huashu kingdom. Tell me everything clearly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a gentle yet sharp strength. Before she finished speaking, she released her grip, and the pink arrow, trailing a dim light, silently pierced the woman's brow. The wet woman's body trembled violently. Fear and confusion appeared on her pale face. Then, the cold blue light in her eyes was replaced by pink hearts, her pupils gradually shrunk, and she seemed to have been hollowed out from the inside. The sea breeze lifted her long hair. Her consciousness was forcibly dragged into a dream world built of love and hate by the arrow of lust. Her memory remained unchanged, but subconsciously she had come to regard Yang Xinxin as a deity to whom she had to give everything. It includes her own memories, the secrets of the land by the lake, and all the loyalty she once took pride in. A flood of memories, following the trajectory of that arrow of desire, poured directly into Yang Xinxin's mind. Here ends today's chapter. I hope you liked it. Kindly do also subscribe to my gaming channel. I have to Fina a way to survive. Thanks.
Tell me in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. If you love manga style stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe the Buzz Play Manga. See you in the next chapter with more surprises.